to the Horror Academic. This time around we're going to talk about another one of my all-time favorite films. You're going to hear that a lot. You guys are probably starting to get sick of me saying that, I'm sorry. But this is a great platform for me to tell you the great movies that I think exist out there, and the ones I want to share with you that you should also be watching if you are also a horror fan. So, today we're going to talk about From Beyond. Now, you're probably saying, why aren't we talking about Reanimator? And I know I'm a little backwards here. I'm going to do From Beyond first, but there's a couple reasons why. First off being, I bought the Shout Factory, Scream Factory edition of From Beyond before I bought the Arrow version of Reanimator, which I just bought, so I haven't watched yet. And I have watched this. So that's point number one. But even more importantly, of the H.P. Lovecraft-inspired Stuart Gordon, Jeffrey Combs, Barbara Crampton, Brian Yuzna family of films, From Beyond is my favorite. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. And if you're not as familiar with it, but you are a Reanimator fan, that's why I'm talking about it today, because I want to make sure you've also seen this great film. So what's so great about From Beyond? So if you aren't familiar with the world of Reanimator and the Lovecraft-inspired films from this group of people, let's start with a little background. You have Brian Yuzna, the producer, Stuart Gordon, the director, Dennis Paoli, the screenwriter, and the three of them together are adapting stories by H.P. Lovecraft, and it's not the kind of hardcore adaptations, alright? So this is not a bleak, perhaps maybe Hammer or Amicus version of a Lovecraft story. This is a loose adaptation. This is very much films of the period that they're made in, and they are, to varying degrees, fun films. I say varying degrees because Reanimator is one of those movies like Evil Dead 2 that is just kind of a horror comedy classic. From Beyond, not as much, but considering the subject of where we're coming from in Lovecraft's world, is a lot more lighthearted than you would have seen from Lovecraft. So, yes, Lovecraft did write a short story called From Beyond, and it was a very short story, just like the story for Reanimator was a very short story. So it gives the screenwriter and the director a lot of room to flesh out the world of this itty-bitty little story. We're talking stories that are less than 10 pages. I believe less than 5 pages in this case. So we have the concept that there are scientists who are working on the ability to see the world around us. If you know anything about Lovecraft, you know, among other things, he was paranoid about everything around him. And when he learned about microbes and germs and all of that, he became hyper paranoid. And it came out in his fiction. And he was, through the world of his fiction, we see this idea that there are things surrounding us like we're swimming in some soup. And they're fairly demonic in nature, or alien creature-like. So you have his kind of vague poetry of words that Lovecraft is famous for, his alphabet soup of animal creatures. And on the other side, you have fans of his work who are trying to bring them to film. And his movies are not the easiest to do that with. I mean, Edgar Allan Poe tells a story in a short, in a short packet, and it's pretty easy. He lays it all out. He gives you all the characters, he describes everything, and he tells you what the evil is. Where Lovecraft kind of likes to tell you that there is evil. And it's unnameable and undescribable, and that's really hard when you're writing a screenplay to know, well, what the hell does undescribable look like? Oh, right, I can't describe it. But what it does also is give them the freedom to kind of interpret it themselves, and I think they do an amazing job with that. We have these amoeba-like creatures in the world of From Beyond, which I think are perfect for this setting. So you have these three guys working together, and they made Reanimator. Reanimator, in its own way, was a pretty big success, actually. I mean, a fairly independent film, got a lot of praise, so much that Charles Band comes in, and he says, you know, well, let me executive produce your next film, and, you know, they, of course, you know, there's the story that Gordon really wanted to make Dagon, and they're like, well, you can't afford a bunch of fish people, so come up with something else. So here you have us with this brief story and this huge world to fill in the blanks, right? So that's what From Beyond became. The great other thing about that is that From Beyond is also kind of this playing ground for a whole mess of guys in the special effects realm. And you get people who come off of this film right into Evil Dead 2. Or, you know, people who worked on, you know, Day of the Dead coming into this film. So you have a lot of the guys who end up being K&B. And K&B being, like, in the 90s, the name in special effects. And they are, of course, the guys who worked on, you know, the grouping of films of Day of the Dead, Evil Dead 2, and, you know, some of them even From Beyond. And that's, you know, Howard Berger, that's Greg Nicotero, and that's Robert Kurtzman. They kind of form a massive bond working on these couple of pictures together and form, like I say, the biggest effects house that there was. You know, aside from the K&B guys, you have there's a lot of hands involved in making the special effects for this film. Mostly because it's an abbreviated time frame, so the more hands, the more things are getting done. So you have someone like Mark Sjostrom, who had worked on many, many, many productions, who was the supervising producer on this picture. You also have Jean Valek, John Carroll Bugler, and dozens of people, literally, making up your effects crew. And that's one of the reasons why I love From Beyond, is the effects are so original, so different, and because you can see all of these people really kind of coming together and creating these beautiful designs. Grotesquely beautiful, you know what I mean. But effects alone are not the best part, but they're a big reason why this film, I think, works so well and translates so well. It's the world of physical effects really in its heyday, and some beautiful work that when you watch it now, yeah, you think we feel a little nostalgic for that period, but it lasts better because of it. If they had made this film even 10 years later, it would have been at least partially digital, if not half of the effects digital, which would have taken away so much of the timeliness of this film, and I think now it stands the test of time better because of the world of physical effects and how it affected it. So that's a huge part for me of why this is important. It's again, like I say, the continuation of the grouping who made Reanimator. It's all of the brilliant minds that come together in the effects crew, and the kind of like the final thing that makes this movie great for me are the main cast of actors. And you're real powerhouses in the world of horror. And this is one of the films, I think, that makes them that much greater. You have Jeffrey Combs, who, of course, was the lead in Reanimator. He was Herbert West. You have Barbara Crampton, also just coming off of Reanimator. And then, to round it out, you have the amazing Ken Foree of Dawn of the Dead. So, the three of them work well, so great together. There's a lot of chemistry. You can see between Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton, because this is their second film together, how much they gel. And then Ken Foree is just perfect to kind of, when things get heavy, he kind of like brings in the levity. And the three of them work amazingly together, and I love it. There is a wonderful little interview with Barbara Crampton on the special features where she talks about the great thing for her about From Beyond is how it is a bit of a gender swap from Reanimator, where the kind of important scientist figure versus kind of the object, right? The person who is in some ways a damsel in distress. And the fact that Jeffrey Combs was maybe not quite as cool with that gender swap, but for her, it gave her an amazing breakout role, and that makes her the kind of definitive, honored, kind of scream queen of the era that we see her as today. And her lasting power, both of them, their lasting power in the genre is amazing, and she is really kind of, through being extremely active, just like Jeffrey Combs, constantly on camera, and also now kind of in a more behind-the-scenes role, and then even on top of it, a bit of a taking on a journalistic role with Fangoria's reboot. She's really solidified her stance. She is one of the women of horror, and she's this is the movie I think that makes her shine. So for that, I think this is an amazing way that this trio of actors work together. I mean, I love Ken Foree's character of Bubba. You know, he's kind of the security guy amongst the group. He's there just to kind of make sure things don't go off the rails, and he kind of gets sucked into it at times as well, but he kind of keeps his cool, but he also keeps it grounded. And he, in some ways, is kind of the voice of the audience at times, which is wonderful. He does a great job of that, of just kind of like laying it out flat. Like, okay, I don't know your science lingo, but what the hell just happened? You know, he's that guy, and I love him for that. Also, while I keep referring to it as a trio of actors, we do know that most of this is because the motions got started in this film because of Dr. Pretorius, and that is Ted Sorrell. He does an amazing job in this film. I really don't know him from other films as well, but he is he portrays this kind of smarmy and at the same time hyper intelligence. He does a great job combining the two personality traits, and I don't know it as he is the villain of the piece, and in many ways a lot of it relies on his character. So I just want to make sure I put a little shout out there for Ted Sorrell, and make sure, you know, Dr. Pretorius, you can't have the movie without him. He's all over it, and he's all over the damn place in this movie. He's creeping and gross and growing at you. So yeah, Ted Sorrell, Dr. Pretorius. Jeffrey Combs was Crawford Tillinghast. So Jeffrey Combs played Crawford Tillinghast, which was Dr. Pretorius's assistant, who does a lot of the physical numbers crunching in science. He's kind of the computer guy, the tech, who makes Pretorius's sciences work. He is the element that brings us to Barbara Crampton's character. And Barbara Crampton plays his psychiatrist, Dr. Catherine McMichaels. And, you know, she has that kind of straight-laced character down pat, which is excellent compared to how casual her character in Reanimator was. This is very different. And of course, you know, it can't be a movie made in the 80s without her ability to take off her glasses, take the bun out of her hair, and be beautiful. So, gotta play on that trait, right? She does it well. I can't hold that against her. She didn't write it. And like I said before, Ken Foree is Bubba Browning. He's the kind of cop on site. He is to make sure that Crawford, who is technically in custody, is not going to run away or in any way harm Dr. Catherine Michaels. So that's Bubba's role. But Ken Foree makes it so much more than that, and, you know, he's just great in the movie. So, three great actors working together, amazing. And between those three elements and a little H.P. Lovecraft on top of the credits, I think this is why we have a classic film. So, one other thing I'll say is that From Beyond is kind of the slightly more serious film compared to Reanimator and Reanimator's sequels. Reanimator's obviously far more off the deep end and far more wacky, zany, crazy in a very fun way, and I love it and I enjoy it. But maybe going back to some of the things I talked about on my Day of the Dead video, I was always more, when I started into the horror world, I was looking for the serious horror. And in many ways, that was this film for me, compared to Reanimator. And it does have that kind of hard science stance at times, even though we're talking about mythical science. And it has its moments of the kind of, there's this concept of the pineal gland and what happens when you overextend your pineal gland, quite literally in this sense, and what that means to how it affects you in crazy ways, and the bizarre sexuality of Dr. Pretorius. And I think all of it together, though, still brings it into a far more serious realm than Reanimator. And because it wasn't quite as silly and funny, it doesn't get mentioned as often as Reanimator does, which is a shame, because I love this film. And like I say, I'm in many ways more than I love Reanimator. So, but I really think the cast and the amazing effects are so much of why this movie's wonderful. And, of course, I mean, Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna work together in wonderful ways too to bring these Lovecraft stories to life with Puglisi's writing. So, all of that said, this is why you need to have this movie. So let's talk a little bit about the different ways I own this movie. Alright, so first up is the Laserdisc. So my Laserdisc of From Beyond is fairly bare bones. It is not a special edition in any way. This is a Vestron video. I think pretty much the VHS tape I had was the same edition, but this is, you know, big, beautiful Laserdisc, and it's hard to say no to it, right? Of course, it's beautiful with some autographs. I have the power trio, as it were. I have Jeffrey Combs, Barbara Crampton, Ken Foree rounding it out, and it just was a wonderful way for me to show my love for this film and capture their names all together on it. So, if you gotta have a Laserdisc, this is why. So, Laserdisc on From Beyond. Nothing special, but just looks pretty. Next, we got the DVD. Okay, the DVD with the strange sci-fi cover that I don't know what movie this cover is for, but it says From Beyond? Yeah, this does not look like From Beyond to me. But bought it anyway because when this version came out, it was the unrated director's cut, which is pretty close to the other cuts that I had. This is an MGM, oddly enough. Don't know why they had the rights to it, but they did. Special features, had an audio commentary, a little featurette from the director, one about the editing, interview with the composer. I believe all these things show up on the Blu-ray we're going to look at in a minute. But yeah, I bought it when it came out, pre-ordered it because I saw the name pop up on Amazon. I was like, oh, From Beyond, I gotta have that. So, strange cover, but if you need DVD edition, at least you get some good extras on this one. The thing we're really talking about today, though, is the Blu-ray edition. I love Scream Factory, the Shout Factory, Scream Factory division. I think we have talked on this show, like every other movie has been a Scream Factory edition, and I'm very grateful for all the wonderful work they do in these transfers. The movies look beautiful, they sound amazing, and they're full of these wonderful featurettes. I really appreciate all of the hard work they put into these, and From Beyond did not disappoint. So, this, as opposed to, let's just compare, shall we? The DVD to the Blu-ray. Which one to you tells the story of From Beyond? Yeah, I still don't know what the hell this movie was. Anyway, so what do we get in the way of extras? Like I said, the DVD extras do show up on here. We do have the interview with the composer, the interview with the editor. We have, I believe the audio commentary may be the same. The behind the scenes in general, I think they do some really great work compiling images that I know I hadn't seen many of. And the Barbara Crampton interview is really wonderful, so very happy for that. I don't see it listed on here, but I do believe there was a really good interview with the effects crew. I don't know why it's not listed in here unless it was also a feature from the DVD that they just don't put on the back of the packaging. But to see, like, one after another who the people that were involved. And like I said, this movie didn't get as much coverage as some of the others back in the Fango days, or even any retrospectives from like Rue Morgue or anything like that. So I was not quite as familiar with who actually worked behind the scenes on the film as far as the effects crew. So to see them in person talking about it was pretty impressive for me, especially having watched so many extras over time, especially with these extras that I've been watching from the different Shout Factories, and to see so many familiar faces, it was just kind of blowing me away, just how huge this crew was and how great they were. So I'm totally going to tell you, like I have before, you need to own this one. If you're a horror fan, if you're a fan of Reanimator and you haven't seen it, just buy this. You're going to love it. You are. There's nothing else to tell you. It's just a great movie. I mean, it's one of my all-time favorites. If I had to make like a top 10's tough, it might be like an 11 or 12. This is pretty high still on my list. Because, I mean, you gotta make room for, like, Chainsaw and Evil Dead and all that. And, yes, we will talk about those movies. I just haven't gotten to them yet. So, I can't tell you how much I love this movie. It's bizarre. I don't think you're ever really quite prepared the first time you see it for just how out there From Beyond gets. But I will say that watching it again did make me go online and go, well, I need to have Reanimator. I haven't seen that in a while. Let me look on and see what special editions there were. So there will be, in the new year, there will be an episode where I talk about Reanimator, because I did pick that up off just to how much I enjoyed revisiting From Beyond. So there you go. My pick for the day, From Beyond, Scream Factory edition by Shout Factory. I think you're going to like it. Well, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on The Horror Academic. Thanks.